The phone still rings in my head even when the room is quiet. At 95, I sometimes mistake silence for another call that I am choosing not to answer. People think old age makes you deaf. It doesn't. It makes you selective in a way that becomes dangerous. I am telling you this because one ignored call can stretch across 40 years and still not end. I know this better than anyone because I stopped answering my son when he still called me Mama without hesitation. I remember the last time I let it ring until it stopped 6 rings, then silence, then nothing that looked like consequences at the time. Only later did it grow teeth. My name doesn't matter much anymore. In documents, I am just widow, age 95, living alone. But I once had a house that smelled of boiled soup at 6 p.m. and a boy who used to run barefoot across cold tiles to reach the telephone before I did. He always believed I would answer. That belief was the only thing I never realized I was breaking. The mistake was not a single moment. It was a habit, a refusal that looked small every time I made it. "Tell him I'm busy," I would say, or "I'll call back later." Later kept moving further away, like a chair dragged out of reach. There was one call December. I think it was 1981 when the wind was pressing against the kitchen window so hard the glass sounded like it might remember how to crack. The phone rang while I stood over a pot I didn't even need to stir. I remember looking at it. I remember deciding it could wait. That was the first time I heard silence answer me back. I am not telling you this to sound wise. I am telling you because I know exactly what it costs when a child stops calling not because they are gone, but because they learned you will not come. It was January 1987 when everything started to feel smaller, as if the house itself was learning to hold its breath. Snow pressed against the windows, flattening the world into white silence. The phone rang at 9:13 while I dried my hands after washing 3 plates and a spoon I always placed in the same spot. 1 ring. 2. By the 3rd, I was already thinking he would call again. By the 6th, I turned toward the window instead of the phone. It stopped. That same afternoon, I bought potatoes I didn't need just to have something to carry. A week later, Sunday 11/27, it rang again. I stood there longer than necessary, telling myself I was tired, that I would call back. At the 4th ring, I wiped a counter that was already clean. At the 9th, it stopped again. After that, I learned how to live around the silence instead of through it. I ate later so I wouldn't sit near the phone. I stopped waiting for footsteps in the hallway. I told myself peace was what I felt, but it was only absence learning how to behave. Then came the hospital letter. I opened it too fast, like I was afraid it might speak first. And after that letter, there was one last call I did not answer. Spring 1991 smelled like wet soil and something I no longer belonged to. The phone rang at 18:03. I reached it immediately this time, my hand already on the receiver when I heard his voice through the line. "Mama," and another sound behind it, hospital announcements, footsteps, a door closing too late. I froze. I could have spoken. I didn't. Then later came again the worst habit of all. That evening at 18:03, I was in the hallway with my coat half buttoned, preparing to go out for bread. The phone rang with a weight I had never heard before. I stood there listening until I told myself I would call back in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I didn't pick up. I heard him through the line. "Mama, if you're there," and something in the background like a hospital corridor swallowing voices. Then he said, "I don't think I'll be home tonight." I lifted the receiver too late. Only static answered. Then a long tone. Final. Empty in a way that wasn't technological anymore. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear long after there was nothing left to hear. When I finally put it down, my hand was shaking so badly I had to hold the wall. I said his name out loud, and the house did not answer back. That was the moment I understood a call is not just sound, it is a bridge, and I had watched mine burn while calling it later. After that night, I stopped calling it a phone. It became something else in my mind, a small black witness sitting in the corner of the house collecting everything I refused to fix. Busy became avoidance. Later became disappearance. Silence became the sound of someone still waiting after hope has left. I never received another call from him, only letters that arrived too late to change anything, written in a handwriting that looked like it had stopped arguing with life. One said, "I stopped calling because I didn't want to interrupt your life anymore." I read it until the paper folded itself into something I could not undo. The rule I learned too late is simple. If the phone rings and your heart already knows who it is, do not negotiate with time. Answer it. Not because every call matters, but because some calls are final without warning. Now I sit in the same kind of chair, older, quieter, surrounded by a house that no longer expects anything from me. You might think you would never do what I did. I thought that too. I thought I had time. Time never argued. It only left. And now the phone still sits in the corner, unchanged, silent, as if it is waiting for a version of me that will never arrive. Sometimes I walk past it and feel my hand move before my memory stops it. Not because I fear the phone, but because I fear what I would say if it rang again. There is a photograph on the wall near it. My son, young, leaning forward like he is still waiting for me to turn and say his name properly. Sometimes I whisper it, but the room does not respond. Only silence does. And silence, I have learned, never forgets. It just waits longer than we do.